Jingle bells, Batman smelt, Robin laid an egg.
In Gotham City, crime rarely pays, and it certainly costs the taxpayers. That's because every time another megalomaniac is brought to justice, they're sent to a state-run institution called Arkham Asylum. Arkham is renowned for its gloomy, often rain-soaked and lightning-struck exterior, along with its tragically shoddy security detail. This decrepit facility, designed to rehabilitate the uncontrollably insane, has housed the greatest villains Batman has ever faced. But it hasn't always been home to the rogues gallery of Gotham City. The Asylum first appeared in Batman 258 by Dennis O'Neil, published in 1974. It was called Arkham Hospital, and didn't get labeled an asylum and occasionally a sanitarium until 1979. At the time, it was not located in Gotham City, but in a fictional Massachusetts town created by pulp author H.P. Lovecraft. The short story The Thing on the Doorstep, published in 1933, was the first to mention an Arkham sanitarium, where Edward Derby, a victim of possession, was committed before being murdered by a close friend. This method of housing mentally ill patients was possibly derived from the Kirkbride Plan, established by Dr. Thomas Story Kirkbride in 1845. The plan was a Victorian-era system of creating asylums to house large amounts of patients in quarters intended to promote privacy and comfort. One of its buildings, the Danvers State Hospital, is rumored to have inspired Lovecraft's fictional sanitarium. The first residents to Arkham Asylum with a connection to Batman were Two-Face and the Joker. Not everyone with an alter ego apprehended by Commissioner Gordon automatically bought a ticket to Gotham's loony bin. Relatively less disturbed villains like Catwoman and Penguin were among the handful incarcerated at another facility, Blackgate Penitentiary. Even former members of Arkham's staff have returned to serve time within its walls, notably Dr. Jonathan Crane, Hugo Strange, Lyle Bolton, and Harleen Quinzel. Len Wein, who co-created Swamp Thing and edited The Watchmen, penned a new chapter in Arkham's history in the 1980s. In Batman 326, he moved it to the suburbs of Gotham, and in Who's Who, the definitive directory of the DC Universe, Volume 1, which was published in 1985, Wein began to flesh out its backstory. He stated the facility was founded by Amadeus Arkham in 1921 after being given the land by his mother, Elizabeth. Inspired by her severe mental illness, he dreamt up a safe house of sorts for the criminally insane. Martin Mad Dog Hawkins was among the asylum's first guests. Having murdered Dr. Arkham's wife and child, it was not a huge surprise when Hawkins was accidentally electrocuted shortly after being admitted. Following the stock market crash of 1929, Amadeus became as mentally unstable as his patients and wound up residing in the institution he founded. Arkham took to carving bizarre symbols on the walls of his cell and died in his sleep 30 years later. In 1989, Grant Morrison and Dave McKeon decided to take a lucid, surreal approach to Arkham's storied grounds, and created a Batman comic more abstract than any before it. With a visual tone evocative of a dazed nightmare, a serious house on serious Earth reimagined old villains and opened old wounds. The comic is, in some ways, the inspiration for the upcoming game from Eidos and Rocksteady Studios. The story has Arkham's patients taking control of the facility and holding its staff hostage, prompting Commissioner Gordon to send in his lone cloaked negotiator to make things right. Predictably, the Joker assumes a leadership role among the inmates, while Two-Face is weaned off his trademark coin in favor of a six-sided die, and later a tarot deck, rendering him socially inept and basically useless. Dodging advances from Clayface, Dr. Destiny, Scarecrow, Mad Hatter, Maxie Zeus, and Killer Croc, Batman finally reaches the hostages in a hidden room high in Arkham's tallest tower. It's there he discovers the current administrator of Arkham, Dr. Cavendish, is responsible for the whole fiasco. The room served as the sleeping quarters for Elizabeth Arkham, mother to Amadeus. Her delusional cries often spoke of a giant bat that was terrorizing her mind and their home. Upon finding a diary that retold these events, Cavendish assumed Batman was that creature and decided to have the demons of the Asylum finish him off. His other hostage, Dr. Ruth Adams, took her first opportunity to kill Cavendish upon this realization, leaving Batman to escape Arkham in as normal of a state as can be expected. (1992) saw the Arkham bloodline reinstated to manage the family business. In Shadow of the Bat 1, Jeremiah Arkham takes over his great-uncle's work. In the 4-part story arc, The Last Arkham, Batman fakes insanity to go undercover and is placed under Jeremiah's custody. The Caped Crusader is able to uncover evidence convicting the serial killer Zsasz, who was also introduced in Shadow number 1, but not before Jeremiah inflicts his own gruesome form of rehabilitation on Batman. Nightfall dropped in 1993, and before Bane breaks Batman's back in the story, he demolishes Arkham Asylum and lets all the wackos loose. Blasted off its foundations, the site is moved to Mercy Mansion, the long-vacant former home of cement tycoon Eric Mercy, and a one-time hideout for the Joker. Eventually, Batman gets better, and all the villains go back to Arkham, where they belong. The inmates of Arkham almost got cleaned out when they were poisoned by a patient named Crippen in 1995's Devil's Asylum, part of the comic line Underworld Unleashed. The story has intergalactic tempter Neron provoking Crippen into contaminating the facility's food supply, endangering the entire Rogues Gallery, particularly villains Two-Face, Riddler, and Mr. Zsasz. Even Jeremiah, the building's administrator, ingests a bad cookie. Batman swiftly ends the crisis by giving Crippen a taste of his own medicine. Numerous Batman storylines were unfolding by the end of the century: Shadow of the Bat, Legends of the Dark Knight, and Detective Comics, among others. Before Gotham entered the new millennium, it was struck by a massive earthquake in 1998's Cataclysm. The event shook through every Batman storyline. In the crisis that followed, which plays out in the crossover storyline No Man's Land, Arkham is completely shut down. Joker and Harlequin seize the asylum, marking the series as another possible inspiration for the upcoming game. Also revealed in the cracks of No Man's Land is the existence of the Northwest Batcave, a secondary headquarters for the Dark Knight. In 2003, writer Dan Slott peeked into the madhouse in a 6-part miniseries called Living Hell. The drama follows conman Warren White as he slips out of a heavier sentence by faking insanity. The last place anyone should use that defense is Gotham, because White is sent straight to Arkham. After some quality time on the inside, White realizes he'd rather be in prison. An escape attempt almost gets him killed after confiding in and consorting with therapist Ann Carver, who turns out to be serial killer Jane Doe. Despite being saved by Batman, White was kept confined in Arkham's walls. Today, in the middle of 2009, the second Arkham is no more. Most in the DC universe assume that Batman is dead at the hands of Superman megavillain Darkseid. In the 3-issue limited series Battle for the Cowl, villain Black Mask seizes ownership of Arkham, cons the flood of villains that subsequently spill out into following him, then destroys the asylum for the second time. Jeremiah surveys the damage and vows to rebuild his ancestral business yet again. These These events, though numerous, are just a spoonful of the madness that's ensued inside the grimy stone edifices of Arkham Asylum since it was first built 34 years ago. It's been revisited in every major story arc, including Black Orchid and The Dark Knight Returns. It's been filmed a handful of times, drawn in multiple afternoon cartoons, and its services have been sought to rehabilitate characters from Alan Moore's Swamp Thing and Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. Arkham was where all the good stories start and stop. It seems a crime to lock up this abusive and corrupted group of devious masterminds, especially because it's hard to believe anyone thought actually keeping them there would make them any better. But they gotta go somewhere. As long as there's an empty plot or an abandoned estate to house its deranged family, Arkham Asylum will stand.